Welcome back to the Leading and Your Founder podcast. Today we are joined by Robert Leigh, who is a founder and equity partner in DeVono. DeVono is the UK's leading occupier-only commercial real estate consultancy, meaning that they only work exclusively for businesses looking for office space and have never represented a landlord, unlike other agencies who work on both sides and have a conflict of interest. So welcome, Robert. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks, man. So could you just delve a little bit into your journey and how you ended up in this industry, what led you to found a company, and a bit about your background?
Yeah, with pleasure. I started what kind of seems to be an eternity ago, where I left college, didn't go to university, left college and always had a passion for real estate, for property. So my first stab at real estate was actually in residential, which I loved. It was a really you get to see beautiful properties, you get to view amazing spaces, meet really interesting people. But I loved part of what I loved about it. It was really cutthroat. The way in which residential brokers operated back then was a world away from what I experience now, but it was all about first the phone, who was the most tenacious, who was who demonstrated the most tenacity. And that was a part of the I really, really liked. I used to joke with my colleagues, it was almost like a draw gun for the telephone. Whoever answered the phone first was the one that got the opportunity.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed that. But after a period of time, I just realised that there was a real magic for me in terms of being in central London. There was a real magic for me in terms of wanting to work with businesses as opposed to consumers. So I wanted to move over to commercial. And at the time I took a huge pay cut to do that because I was in residential, I was earning great commission, great commission, but I wanted to move over and effectively start again as a junior, whereas I was a senior lettings negotiator when I left the residential market. So I went to work for a small firm acting for offices and also retail. And I thought that was really interesting, that it would give me the opportunity to understand both markets and then decide in which direction I wanted to go. Like all things in life, they never always go to plan. And unfortunately, the firm that I joined, it was actually two brothers. One did the retail and one did the offices. And after, I think it was about 3 months into the role, unfortunately, the residential retail sort of partner passed away unexpectedly at a really young age, 40 years old, on the golf course no less. So a real tragedy. And the other brother, who obviously was going through a traumatic time, sort of came in the next day and said, "Look, Robert, just go. There's nothing here for you to do. And also I'm grieving and I've got no sort of I've got no energy to move you on and to grow you." But out of loyalty, I wanted to stay on for another 3 months, steady the ship, and then and give him a nice handover.
That's great.
On the phones, all of that sort of normal stuff. But it just felt like really the right thing to do, and not to leave him totally in the lurch. So that's what I did as a transition. And it was quite hard for me because I had always had quite a formulaic sort of process-driven approach to work. I wanted to go here, then I wanted to move here. This was how I was going to scale my sort of career. So being really process-driven, I was sort of a bit lost. But one of the things that really kind of niggled me was that I went straight from college into work. And that was for me quite a brutal transition. From almost working, 1 day a week at best over a duration of the week to 5 days a week. So that was quite a hard transition. And all my friends were at university. Yeah, I think the first 2 weeks of my working career were probably the worst 2 weeks of my life, as I was driving to work in the morning with me and my friends, and all my friends sharing their Freshers Week stories with me.
Right.
And let me tell you, my experience of those 2 weeks were very different to my friends who were on Freshers Week, let me tell you. But it was just that realization of 5 days a week, 8 till 6. It was hard for me to process at the very start of my working career, I have to be honest.
Absolutely. Do you think that sharp kind of change allows you to build up empirical experience and like grow faster though, instead of like, being in the bar and partying and things? Because I'm sure that's what they were telling you about.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd never regretted not going to university, but it was just a very steep learning curve to,
Absolutely.
Is this it? Is this it? And obviously when you're a junior, you're just learning. It's just you're making teas, you're making coffees, you're learning your trade. Lots of twiddling your thumbs as well, and lots of shadowing. So I suppose one of the first things is, well, I've got 8 hours a day. How do I feel these when you're just starting to learn your trade at a very junior level?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I really remember that vividly, because that was for me the milestone. This is the start of my career, start of my working life, and this is what life looks like for a very long time. Although actually, at the time when I left the commercial real estate firm, one of the things I realised is I didn't feel like I had much to talk about. When talking about myself, when sort of explaining what I've done, my experiences, it was just from college to work. And I didn't think that I had enough experience and enough storytelling about who I was as an individual. And traveling had always been a real passion of mine, and it was always something that I put off, because I'm on this journey. This year I'm doing this, the next year I'm doing that, and there was no room for traveling. It just seemed too much of a radical idea at the time. And with this window opening, I decided that, well, actually, I think if I take one step back, it's going to be 2 steps forward. I think that if I go traveling, I think it will have a world of good on me. I think it'll broaden my horizons. It'll make me hopefully far more worldly, but also much more independent. And it will broaden my horizon. You know, it's all about having experiences. It's all about doing things differently. And I thought that this would ultimately lead to better outcomes for me, as well as it being a hell of a lot of fun as well.
Yeah.
So I lived at home at the time. That was helpful. I had nothing to lose. I had a roof over my head, and I was about 20. I was 19 at the time, so it was 1997, I think it was. So a time when actually traveling was quite daunting. But I booked a 12-month ticket. It was something called Trailfinders at the time, where you could sort of start your journey. I had my Lonely Planet guide.
Bit like Interrail type of thing.
Yeah, it was Interrail, and actually with something like Trailfinders, they would book your 12 destinations for you, and all the ticket times would be kind of interchangeable.
Perfect.
But I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have predefined stops. I want to get somewhere, stay as long as I want, and then actually book my next destination, which could be something totally different. But I didn't want to predefine where I wanted to go. So
and were you traveling alone, right?
I was traveling alone.
Yep.
So it was around summer. So actually the first 2 months of my journey, I was traveling with 2 of my best friends who were actually on summer holidays at the time.
Cool, yeah.
So my first 2 months was Malaysia and Thailand.
Oof.
So it was a nice sort of introduction to traveling with friends. And then after they went back after 2 months, I was then left to my own devices. So I travelled the remainder 15 months. So I was only prescribed to be there after 12, but I got the bug and actually then extended it for another 4 months. But for most of that time, I was travelling on my own. I was travelling to all over Southeast Asia, India, Nepal, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam.
Amazing.
All at a time when they weren't as accessible as they are today.
Yeah. Because they're so touristy now, aren't they? Like incredibly packed.
Yeah, and you've got Wi-Fi, you've got everything. We didn't have any of that, so I had Lonely Planet books, and it's quite it's quite exhausting when you travel on your own, because you've just got to reimagine. You've got to re-establish yourself every trip or every destination. So if I went somewhere for 2 weeks and created friends and created relationships and move on to the next place, I've got to do all the same thing again. So it can sometimes get exhausted, as opposed to if you're traveling with another individual, you can actually be really non-social if you want to. But that was something that I liked. I pushed myself to go and speak to people, speak to strangers, adopt in new groups, which was an amazing experience.
Absolutely.
And luckily for me, before I went traveling, I interviewed at another commercial real estate business, which was dedicated to offices. And actually at the time I interviewed, there wasn't a role that was available, but as I was traveling, when I was 12 months through my traveling, I got a call out of the blue from this individual to say, hey, there wasn't a role available then, but I was so impressed with how you were in the interview. I'd love you to come and join me when you get back. And I said to him, I'd love to come, love the role, but I'm not going to be back for 3-4 months. And he said, absolutely fine. So I found myself in this perfect situation where I was traveling with a known opportunity to come back to.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
that was really nice. But I knew it was time to come home when I started to get those butterflies and that guilty feeling, which is, okay, Rob, you've had your fun now. It's time to like get back and build a career, and that's what I did.
Yeah, amazing. And you came back grounded by the sounds of things. I think it's definitely a valid decision. It's like, I mean, I'm kind of in a similar scenario. I went from ending sixth form into starting this business basically with somebody who I went to sixth form with as well. So like we're basically the co-founders of it. But it is a bit like, you're in that kind of grind state and you're just like, no, I'm going to build this thing. But at the same time, I think realistically, you're going to build character and a lot of social skills and great communication skills if you're to go out and kind of push yourself into those situations. So that's amazing. Yeah.
I agree. I think for me, the opportunity presented itself. I never wanted to walk away from, a going concern to go traveling, but I certainly wanted to go traveling when an opportunity arose. And hopefully you might find that natural break in your career. It might not be 18 months, but it might be 3, and that might be enough.
Yeah, fair, exactly. I mean, to be fair, I'm going to, and I mentioned the other day, but I'm going to Barcelona tomorrow, and then kind of to Sicily, and then like north upwards into kind of the rest of Italy for like about 8 days. So that's like a very short trip, but hopefully that will be interesting.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, so to go back into kind of founding the company. So you built it or started building in 2003 when there was no other firm doing, occupier only exclusively. So what did the early market look like, and what convinced you that that there was a big market fit there?
Yeah. So the firm that I traveled back to was a great firm that I really enjoyed working for. And we primarily did occupier work. So every call would be, well, we specialize in office occupation. The majority of our work that we do is occupier work. But as soon as a landlord came along, then all the other work would be dropped, because the perceived kudos at that time was to represent landlords. That's where the kudos came from. That's where notoriety came from. And the occupier always played second fiddle. And just through frustration, it was, why do I always have to say we primarily work for occupiers? We predominantly do this. Why couldn't we actually provide occupiers with the same, focus, prestigiousness to a certain extent that landlords receive from their landlord's advisors? And being a landlord advisor was totally commonplace at the time. There was nothing actually new about that or innovative. But why is it okay to specialise at one side of the table and not the other? So that seemed really sort of counterintuitive to me. And this goes back to the point where occupiers were always being underserviced. They were almost looked at as a tool to fulfil a landlord's obligation, not the other way round.
Yep.
And also at the time, so that was sort of what really sparked my interest. Why can't there be someone out there doing the same for occupiers to what landlord advisors are doing for their land? Sound unbiased, advice without conflicts of interest, where the client always knows that we're on their side of the table, always championing their priorities and never doing anything that conflicts with that focus. There was also at the time, there were no websites, there were no interactive websites. Every website was static. There was no such thing as a searchable real estate platform. And apart from there were kind of websites in the flexible world, but that was something that was very different to what was traditional leasing. So I just wanted to do two things. I wanted to be an occupier-only real estate advisor, doing what I was doing already, but without any excuses, without any distractions.
Sole focus, yeah.
sole focus, and also provide a website to the market that no one had seen, which is actually something that was quite innovative, had a searchable map, and something that was really engaging. Previously, it was just static pages.
Oh, very cool.
And just to give you an idea at the time, and you're going back 2003, I think we were the first company not to be called after an individual. So all the others, if you think about any other real estate practice back in 2013, it was always a named individual or named partners within a firm, typically like legal firms at the time. So I just wanted to totally buck that trend and come up with a name that obviously wasn't reflective of my name. And I remember saying at the time, well, all of my clients have got stupid names, so I'd love to join in that club and join them. DeVono, originally the name was De Novo, which is Latin for new, so new concept. But when I was going to register it, there were loads of DeVono Roofing in particular, and I thought, you know what, if I register this now, I'm going to run into trouble. But I love the way that DeVono sounded, and my first initial logo was very similar to Dunhill, which was a luxury menswear brand, which had a long D and a long V, and I just loved the way it looked and feel. So all I did do was swap the N and the V round. So De Novo became DeVono.
Yeah.
And that was the origin of the name.
Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. So what changed on the day-to-day of working with, maybe 80% occupiers and then 20% landlords? I suppose both sides were paying, for advisory fees, but when you switched solely over, did that specializing with occupiers hike the prices? How did your kind of approach switch operationally, day to day?
I think it was more, I suppose it's a good question. The biggest change was just mindset. We are just geared towards servicing occupiers. So the fact that the majority of the work that I did at the time was occupier work until someone said, here's a landlord, go and it was more around, this is my focus. This is everything that I do. Everything that I obsess around is going to be in the best interests of an occupier. And that was a big mind shift. And it just meant that I was able to really focus on what was most important to my clients, as well as all the advice that I would give. Everything that I do would be all geared towards occupiers, as opposed to one day talking to an occupier talking about how low I can get a rent, and then talking to a landlord and saying, well, actually the market's not that bad. I think I can achieve a high price for you.
Exactly.
So all of that goes away. It's just with that real single focus that the occupier was my world, and there was nothing that I wasn't going to do that would ever be not in a client's best interests. And it's that single focus that really enabled me to provide better solutions for clients. And Absolutely. It's what the business became famous for.
Yeah, completely. And it's people like Alex Hormozy are constantly talking about having a uni focus, and it just completely spikes your kind of productivity, the loyalty you get from customers as well, because you're dedicated, so otherwise it's kind of almost like in arbitrage, just connecting the two parties and trying to find somewhere in the middle. It's not fully dedicated. So yeah, great idea.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's bizarre because to a certain extent, we're in an unregulated industry, but you think of all other industries, whether it's tech, whether it's finance, AI, there are all strong regulations. Whereas, rule 101 is not to act for both sides, whereas in real estate, it seems to have gone under the radar. So we wanted to almost regulate ourselves by only ever acting for one side.
Yeah, completely. So because of course this is an industry that you've basically created as you founded the company. So what's tested it the most? Have you ever run into a problem where you're like, well, this doesn't work, this is an unconventional way of doing things, and I haven't found this scenario yet. I haven't seen anybody else deal with it yet. What has tested the founding premise throughout the journey?
Well, I suppose it wasn't our first 5 years wasn't easy. For what was quite a social industry and quite a collaborative industry, I was pretty much shone by the market, and no one could really at that time even fathom why I was doing what I was doing. Forget the fact you've said, George, it was a good idea. No one thought it was a good idea.
Apologies.
They thought it was a bad idea, in fact, and they were, well, why would you want to just act for occupiers and not app for landlords. That seems foreign to me. So we didn't really get much traction from the market. We didn't get much sort of support. And it was only through, and I really had to just demonstrate the model through doing deals, through actually challenging, to actually demonstrating that, look, this is a service that occupiers want. And this is a service that where there's a genuine need for it. So it was only going through the deals where people are okay, this sort of does make a lot more sense, and certainly occupiers seem to be sort of enjoying that process. I think probably one of the reasons why I was also not as well embraced as others is I was a 23-year-old kid starting my own business, which I'm sure ruffled a few feathers. Again, going back 23 years. The real estate was pretty archaic, and unless you were a business of 100 plus years old, you were considered a newbie.
Yeah.
So I think there was sort of two things that were happening here. A, this new concept, but B, who's this kid running around advising corporate occupiers on real estate? Who does he think he is? Who the hell does he think he is? And they were probably right on certainly the latter camp. But I mean, it seems quite radical at the time, but when I was doing it, it just felt like a really natural and normal thing to do.
Yeah.
And when something feels right, you just go with your gut and you persevere with it. And that's exactly what I did.
And some of the most profound innovators are the people who are doing something, as you know, obviously completely brand new. So it's like, why compete if you have with other industries, if you have your own thing that you can just start and just compete, with yourself on. I think, and everybody doing that goes under immense amounts of pressure, and then kind of they get out the other side of it, and then everybody's like, you're a genius, so yeah. Well,
sometimes the best ideas are the simplest, and there's been lots of businesses that have followed our model, so that's a great compliment and testament to what we've done. But there's something nice about having, I suppose, molded our direction of travel when it comes to real estate. And I'd like to think that DeVono played a small part in making that change happen quicker. And look, there's enough work that's out there, but the most important thing for me is that all occupiers are being serviced well. So the fact that there are other firms who also avoid conflicts of interest is a positive thing. Again, as the first, we always lead from the front. We're always innovating. We can't get complacent, all of those things. So there's lots of things that we do to make sure that we stay the number one.
Absolutely, yeah. And just before we go into kind of your work with a certain, case study being OpenAI, what does your company in-house look like now? So how many employees do you have? What are the day-to-day operations like? Do you have multiple advisors and things?
Yeah, so across the business, we've got 42 members of staff, and that covers like all of our disciplines from flexible leasing, so managed and serviced, to traditional leasing, to our insights team, to our managed capabilities, and also to our design and build. So as well as our professional team, so that's dilapidation surveys and business rates as well.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Good stuff. So
part of our journey, is that we need to be full service in terms of the capabilities and advising our clients. We need to be a full turnkey solution to them. So every solution we need to be delivering them in-house.
Yeah, completely. And so they kind of move from the different stages throughout the different team members you have.
Absolutely. Look, a project is a long process. It's a stressful one, and I suppose clients need to know that it's all being handled in-house with one firm to just give them that absolute confidence.
Yeah, completely. And actually, I guess an interesting thing for occupiers or people who are starting to look for a place for themselves would be, what does the first phase look like? Maybe the first couple of weeks working with you. I guess it kind of depends on how much confidence they have in a certain area, but what are some of the first steps that you have when working on a project?
Good question. I suppose for us, it's about fully immersing ourselves in the business. It's trying to understand what their objectives are. Real estate is a really expensive commodity. We want it to be an enabler, not a restrictor. And unfortunately, some people can only answer that question after it's too late. So what we are trying to do is fully understand the business, fully understand its objectives, and then align a real estate solution that best supports that. So we ask some challenging questions, we ask some difficult questions, but we want something to be as useful today as it is in 18 months, 36 months, 5 years. And even the best deal in the world will be expensive if you need to vacate 2 years earlier than the lease allows you to do so. So it's really important that we build in the flexibility that businesses need so that they can scale at the right time, as well as the things that are most important to businesses is culture, staff attrition and retention, because there is a real war on talent. And one of the tangible ways in which businesses can fight culture or improve culture is the physical office.
Absolutely.
So when we understand what those priorities are with clients, we really go about finding the right real estate solution. And real estate, the actual looking at properties is almost the bit at the end. That's the 20-30% at the end. It's about fully understanding the brief. And often where a client ends up is very different to what it started with. But that's part of the journey. That's part of understanding the process. And that's also part of us being able to expose them to all the solutions that are out there in the market. And there are so many now. There's more optionality now than there's ever been before. And our process is to guide them through all of those products to arrive at what is the best conclusion. Absolutely.
Fantastic. So seamlessly into your project with OpenAI on their first permanent London office, an 88,500 square foot office in King's Cross. So from what you can say, what does a brief like that involve? And is there something unique about advising for an AI company on their office space that you could use to help other AI founders, and just out of interest?
Yeah, well, I think people assume that finding the right building is about taking a property brief, and it's not. It's about asking 3 fundamental questions before you even look at property. And that's like, how fast are you growing? How confident are you with those numbers? And what do you need your office to do? And it's those fundamentals that we talk to clients about. And it's normally the 4 things that come up, which is talent, clients, credibility, and security. And how much optionality do you actually need to keep? With AI firms in general, is what the business plan is now might look very different in 18 months' time. So this is how we work with clients. It's understanding growth. It's where we can build an optionality to future-proof. And it's protecting clients as a whole through upside and downside. It's not just about, not everyone is scaling. So this is where we help clients mitigate risk as well. This is with all of our fast-growing companies. But like I said, is the real estate part is the bit on the end where we obviously want to exceed expectation when it comes to putting deals together. And this is how we look to maximize incentive, maximize the types of deals that we're doing. Leverage covenant, which is the strength of the business, to the landlords, to the client's benefit. Lots of landlords are keen to have high profile or even scaling businesses within that building. So it's just how we story tell as to get the best, as to how we get the best outcomes for our clients, as well as that optionality. And again, this is where we work really closely with a lot of our clients to make sure we get that right.
And I guess, like you said, some of it is a kind of sales process and selling why they're a good option, for the space specifically, and I guess that helps you in negotiations too, right?
I think it's all storytelling. I think that gone are the days where it's hard-nosed negotiations. I mean, that's where it can end up. It depends, but from experience, that doesn't always work. So we try to walk through the lens of a landlord. We try to understand what's most important to them, what their objectives are, and then by explaining what's really important to our clients is to reach that common ground, but making sure that we're pulling all the right levers and we're knocking on the right doors to get those best deals. And look, at the end of the day, a lot of negotiations just come down to blunt force at the end, but that is when we're trying to get to that critical end game. And again, a lot of the time it's a collaboration with the landlord's advisor as to how we get the best, outcome, but understanding the huge benefits that clients will have by having certain clients in the right buildings for them.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm sure they're not, frustrated accepting OpenAI in their property. That's a big win.
And you're right, but OpenAI is obviously one of our more well-known clients, but there are lots of other clients who have got great brands behind them who we do exactly the same for.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, and continuing on with London, I'm sure that's the same with a lot of other kind of mega cities or just urban cities.
Yeah.
Larger occupiers in London are now committing to a space for 4 or more years before their lease expires, up from under 3 years in 2022, because Grade A supply is tightening and good options are disappearing before most businesses start looking. So, what do businesses still not understand about how little time they actually have?
The 4-year time scale is for businesses of 100,000 square feet. So they are, to a certain extent, that is one side of the market. But
Okay.
Following COVID, there was a real dearth of development. So there was very little being built in the West End in the city. Occupiers of 100,000 square feet have very few buildings to actually consider. So this is why timescales have been sort of pushed out through that lack of availability. I mean, the beauty when you're a large scale occupier is you have a lease expiry, and it's about marrying up the right types of buildings with a little bit of flex. But I suppose the common thread here, and not all businesses are 100,000 square foot, is that availability is tightening. There is a real race for grade A space. Before COVID, the market was made up of grade A and grade B. And before then, what was the office? The function of the office was provide a working desk where people would go in and do their job. That whole narrative of the office has changed, and it is no longer acceptable for businesses, many businesses, to be providing a subpar space, because employees can work can vote with their feet. And what we're finding now is London is now sort of bounced back to 3.5 days on average a week in the office, which effectively means the majority are back in the office with more regularity. But from the last 12, 18 months, even 2 years worth of focus, one of the biggest priorities for businesses is to get people back to the office with more regularity. How do we make the commute worthwhile?
Absolutely.
So providing grade B space for their staff just wasn't acceptable. So it's almost like the market halved overnight, because what was grade B is now no longer available, and everyone is focusing on grade A. So there are really two sides to the market, and for some businesses grade B is fine, and for those types of businesses there are some fantastic deals that can be done, and really creative and innovative deals that can be done. For those looking for grade A, which is the majority of the majority of the clients that we advise, we need to be much more pragmatic about the types of deals that we do, with the office playing that key role in bringing people back to the office with more regularity, and it being a place where people do want to come back and do make the commute worthwhile. And we've got away from hybrid working to more activity-based working. And what that really means is, where is the best place to provide activity-based working, which is, where is the best place for a particular person to do a particular piece of work? So if there is a piece of work that someone needs to do where they need quiet, no interruptions, then frankly, the home is going to be a hard place to be, providing you've got all the setup and infrastructure. But those people who want to collaborate, they want to work in teams, they want to be part, they want to work with other businesses or other individuals. The office is going to be the best place for that. And now lots of businesses are redefining the purpose of the office to provide those different environments so that people can work in those different scenarios. And that's what's really important to businesses. It's not about providing a desk. Actually, the mix of offices has changed quite radically. Whereas before, the mix of offices was something like 75% and the rest meeting rooms. Now it's a real blend of almost a third office space, a third desking, and then a third actually collaboration space.
Absolutely, yeah, like workspaces.
So that these moments of magic happen, and this is what businesses are so motivated to achieve. You can't put your finger on it, you can't measure it, but you overhear someone's conversation, or you grab someone at the coffee machine. It's those magic moments that can define businesses or can define projects.
Without a doubt, and it just makes me think of, because I don't have an office personally, I work from home. We're only small scale, of course, right now. and we'll probably think about offices in the future, but I've been going to a Santander workspace, and I think there is one in central London as well. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but it's basically free workspaces where you just go in and book a room. And of course, Santander, I think, is using it as like a long-term, probably business client kind of catalyst or something, because at a certain point they'll say, oh, you have to have a business card now to book the rooms, etc. But it is those as well. I think they're somewhat having those collaborative rooms is what the occupiers are wanting and building. And I just think of companies like Google, for example, with really interesting like sofa spaces and like even like I think sport facilities, all this type of stuff. It's like a whole community rather than just like what we had, maybe 40 years ago, which was just boring, very standard offices.
Well, it's not even 40 years ago. It's amazing to think 15 years ago, nothing like that existed. If you were a 5-person or 10-person business, there was nothing that existed for you. So there are more and more so with a huge rise in flexible workspaces, which has been phenomenal for our industry and phenomenal for supporting new and growing businesses thrive. Has been a massive part of DeVono's journey as well. But projects like Santander are a really good one where they act more as an incubator, because it wouldn't surprise me if you have a Santander account.
I actually don't, but which is crazy because I've been using it a lot, but I'm working on getting one with the business manager. Yeah.
There you go. But there are loads of incubators like that just want to foster young businesses and hopefully be part of that exciting journey, which is how we position ourselves with so many of our clients, is that what is a small 15, 20 person requirement now might be 312 months time.
Yeah.
So we want to grow with our clients as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. So landlords are now delivering fully fitted spaces, offering capex contributions and signing 12-month leases that barely existed 5 years ago. But businesses often don't know that that's available. So what are occupiers still getting wrong about the options that are available to them?
It's a good question. I don't necessarily think it's about what are occupiers doing wrong. I think it's more about what landlords could be doing more of. We have got one of the most mature flexible leasing markets in the world, well ahead of the US. And the reason why we are probably ahead of the US by multiple years is from the landlords being so inflexible. 10 years ago, if you wanted a 20-person, 25-person office, you'd be staring down the barrel of a 5 or 10-year deal where you would be taking it as a totally open plan and you would be having to spend £250,000 on a build. And because there was such inflexibility, when flexible solutions came around, it just seemed like such a radical difference to the alternatives that were on the market. So people were moving to serviced offices in swathes. And originally it was limited to only small occupiers, but actually what the market has demonstrated to us over the last 36 months is that taking flexible space is not wedded to smaller occupiers. It's actually some of the biggest occupiers around the world are taking flexible offices. And it's not uncommon for us to be doing flexible deals of 100, 150, 200 people. And what landlords had to do was very, very quickly adapt because the serviced office world was eating their lunch.
Yeah.
So very quickly, almost at necessity, I don't even think that this is something landlords necessarily wanted to do. It was they had to do it because otherwise they would never let their space because the alternatives were too compelling. So landlords very quickly pivoted towards delivering a real alternative to flexible solutions, which is like fully fitted, beautifully designed, beautifully created spaces that I suppose answer a lot of the questions that businesses kind of need and want to thrive. So it's not necessarily about what landlord, and I think our job for occupiers is to because it's all fairly new, is to actually expose them to all of these types of solutions, whether flex, whether it's traditional, and managed is the bit in the middle that I think is still gaining momentum. It's not totally known. Managed means often different things to different people. For me, managed is ultimately that ultimate space as a service, which is something that landlords always historically used in their narrative, but frankly never really executed on it. And I think now landlords have very quickly come to appreciate that they need to be delivering the same the same product to a certain extent, or very close to what flexible solutions, what the flexible market is able to provide. But in terms of looking at it through the occupier lens, I mean, the first mistake that a lot of businesses do is to treat their lease as an event, not the strategy. And I think it's really important that businesses are constantly reviewing the wants and needs of their businesses and not being constrained to a certain extent about what they're in at the moment and how different a solution could look. Because again, lots of our clients are already, the market is moving so quickly. A lot of our clients who are coming to a lease event haven't touched the market in 5 years. So it looks significantly different, I think, within those last 5 years as it did then. So again, it's talking them through those optionalities and exploring all those other solutions. Probably 7-8 years ago, serviced offices was a dirty word in our industry.
Right.
Whereas now it's something that's actually fully embraced.
Yeah.
I think the other mistake is reading headline vacancy rates and assuming that there's a plethora of opportunities that are available, and that isn't the case. And we talk about, obviously every business has got specific needs and specific wants, and when you go to the market and you look for that specificity, there isn't a great deal of solutions that exist. So time, and we've spoken about this before, time is probably one of the most valuable commodities that occupiers have, and time again, unfortunately, occupiers often leave it too late, and that does jeopardize the strategy. So we often say to clients, we need to be speaking to them, depending on the size, and that has a big bearing, but we need to be speaking to some clients 24 months ahead of their lease expiry. And these businesses probably of 200 people or less, we need to be talking to them 24 months earlier. And obviously, as that number pulls in, it comes back to no less than, say, 12 months. But typically for a lot of businesses, they think that runway needs to be much shorter, and it's not. In order for us to narrate the right story, for us to get the optionality, and make sure if other businesses who have got the same requirements start earlier, well, they're going to find out about it earlier. So it's all of these things as to how we can create the best opportunity, as well as often giving the landlord a lot of notice as to what we're doing, because again, it just offers that credibility of a relocation if we leave enough time to consider all the other options, if that is a solution available to them. And I think the last mistake is that I think a lot of businesses obsess around cost per square foot, when actually, whilst we want to do the best deal possible, it's all about full occupancy costs. And that extends to how much space that you take, and that's the key component. There are often far more efficient buildings that could deliver more efficiency at, say, 10,000 square foot that something cheaper could do at 13,000 square feet. And as well as some buildings are more expensive to fit out, some are built, some are not. So again, you put that all into the melting pot. And as you mentioned before, CapEx is a huge component. And CapEx, I mean, landlords now are funding fit outs or delivering fit outs. It's what we call Cat A+, which is now the norm. But if you were to go back 24, 36 months ago, it was quite radical for a landlord to even consider doing a occupier's refurbishment. And that just shows you how much the market's changed, and also how amenable landlords are to delivering solutions to occupiers that they actually want. Whereas before, historically, there were on different pages as to how you would put a deal to. A landlord's objective was often very different to an occupier's objective, whereas I think they're much more aligned now than they've ever been before through necessity. Yeah,
brilliant. It's brought the industry together, Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm curious what you think about newer methods of actually construction, and I guess, new builds, and what the efficiency is like in those builds in comparison to like some of the older spaces in like central London, let's say. So I mean, what do you think about things like modular construction and putting together commercial spaces? Do you tend to work primarily in existing older buildings, or are you kind of working with companies on getting their own place built for them, or newer kind of developments as well?
So being in central London, there's limited amount that you can do in terms of new build from a planning perspective. So there are more refurbishments that happen from a numerical point of view than the new builds do. Obviously, a lot of landlords now are also looking at the sustainability, and it's much more sustainable to refurbish existing buildings as opposed to building brand new ones. But the things that we look at is occupancy density is an important one. ESG, so sustainability, is really important to our clients, and that's part of every business's own sort of agenda and objectives. Fresh air is a key component as well. So you put all of those factors in, those are the things that we look at for businesses. Also the shape of spaces, those that are rectangular, windows on both sides, much more easy to densely populate, as opposed to buildings that are a bit older and have more irregular floor plates. But a lot of what we do is spend time on efficiencies, which buildings work harder for businesses. And the ones that work harder will typically be the brand new ones, as well as the ones that have been comprehensively refurbished.
Okay, amazing. Yeah. So DeVono publishes its own research as well. And so the London Market Quarterly, Investment Occupier Snapshot, sector reports on legal and media workplaces. Why does an advisory firm invest that heavily in producing its own data? And how does it change what you can tell a client before they start looking?
We couldn't rely on landlord data because that's the only data that exists. So we, being an occupier only, we had to back everything that all the advice that we provided had to be wedded to the fundamental belief that we were only communicating with occupiers, not landlords. There's a different narrative that landlord advisors would put to landlord credentials, because they walk in a landlord's shoes and talk about, well, what are the things that are important to them? Half of the things that are presented in landlords' reports are not relevant to occupiers. So we went about providing insights that steeped in our own research, our own data, so that when we talk about clients about vacancy rates, or we spoke to clients about rents per square foot, or incentive packages, this needed to be backed in our own database or our own data, because it would be a mockery of us to be advising clients based on what landlords advisors would be putting out. Now, if we were a landlord advisor, it would be fine to top and tail and take that narrative, because the objectives are aligned. With us, we had to do the opposite. We had to actually ascertain, well, what do occupiers want to know? What is it they need to know? And they need to know that actually it's qualified data, and data they can trust. And that was why we couldn't do what we do without that type of data, because we have to back ourselves when we advise a client on the landscape, how far we can push a deal. It needs to be based on the work that we've done, not the work of a landlord's advisor. 100%. So that's why it was imperative, and that is probably a USP in our marketplace, because not many firms have their own insights teams within their businesses, but for us it was essential.
Absolutely. So you have guys in house who are basically researchers and then putting together this information for clients.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Yeah, that's fun as well, right? Because it's a fun part of the business. Like you're paving your own path, you have your own narrative and things.
Absolutely. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe my insights team would say it's fun, but we trawl through data. We decipher what's true, what's not. And it's really powerful. It's really powerful to talk about to a client and talk to them about what we're physically seeing, and how that translates to a market strategy, and how it translates to the direction of travel for the project. And it deciphers maybe what locations we look at. It deciphers the strategy as a whole. It deciphers the flexibility that we think is achievable. All of that is steeped in our own sort of insights and our data. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's sovereign. Amazing. So did you have confidence that offices would come back after COVID? Because, I mean, as far as I know, a lot of serious people kind of wrote it off as a concept during that time, maybe short-sightedly, but how did you lead DeVono through that period?
I think it was a really hard time. I mean, for us, business sort of stopped overnight. All our pipelines, all of the things that all of our sort of business as usual. So that was a really hard time for us. And we spent the whole year, if not 18 months, doing really pro bono work for clients, where we were actually advising them on how we could do rent mitigation, how we could kind of support them through that challenging time. So it was multiple conversations with landlords as to how we might be able to do that. And it was really humbling from the point of view that As service providers, we always talk about we want to be here for our clients. We want to go above and beyond, and if ever they needed us, we would be there for them. And there are very few scenarios where actually that happens and where you're called upon. And COVID was that for us, because we weren't asking anything of our clients. They were they were in desperate need. They were scared, worried. Real estate was clearly one of their biggest costs. There was no such thing as furlough for offices. So yeah. We were helping clients go through that process and demonstrating the loyalty that they had shown to us. But that was a really hard time. And I think no one, in deepest, darkest COVID, if you can call that, I don't think anyone could prescribe what was going to happen next. But I think from our point of view, there was always that fundamental belief that offices were going to come back. The things that businesses held most important to them, which is identity, culture, a place of belonging, staff attention, nutrition, like none of that goes away. So we were always confident that it would come back, and old habits die hard. It's so normal for the human sort of, for humans to just default back to what was business as usual. But the thing that we could never prescribe is how long that would be, how deep it would be, and how long it would be. But we believed in our mission. We didn't lay anyone off. We kept all of our staff.
Fantastic.
And we knew fundamentally that it would come back, but our priority was to be there for our clients and make sure that they knew that they were being looked after. I mean, there were so many other things that business owners had to worry about. We wanted them to worry one less thing about when it came to someone really fighting their corner for rent deferment, which was ultimately what we were doing at the time, and thinking about, I suppose, innovative ways of which we could provide some relief to clients.
Yeah. When
it came to paying rent.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm interested what that looked like when you were negotiating with landlords, because I mean, they were probably hit the hardest out of a lot of people, right? So how would you go about trying to reduce the rent? Quite rightfully, but then, what's in it for the landlord? How did they manage that?
Yeah, I think some landlords agree. I mean, it's to a certain extent, it's a sort of empathetic negotiation to a certain extent, but there's also the realization that should they do nothing, there could be a real reality that actually the occupier walked away from the space. Landlords didn't hold all of the cards, but also we were totally aware that the landlord had financial obligations as well that they needed to adhere to. But for us, it was about rent deferments. So could we prolong paying rents for a period of time? Rent reductions was obviously preferred, but for many landlords, the rent deferment heeded more outcomes. For a lot of clients who were close to their lease expiries, there were deals that we could do where we could maybe provide an extension, so we could provide the landlord with more security of income, but in response to incentives or relief now. Okay. So there were lots of different ways you could sort of skin a cat when it came to approaching these landlords. And look, not all negotiations were successful, and a landlord could quite simply say no, but with the risk that there could be repercussions as a consequence. But I think many a landlord and occupier relationship was solidified or not in those types of negotiations. And I think that many occupiers, when it came to their leases, when COVID was in the rearview mirror, certainly reflected on how they were treated by their landlord at the time and whether that was an appropriate response or not. So again, a lot of the conversations we had with our clients was around that experience and how fairly or non-fairly they thought they were treated. And listen, some landlords did nothing, and occupiers reflected and said, well, I understand that, but there were much more nuanced scenarios as well.
Absolutely.
But I have to say there were lots of landlords that were particularly good when it came to supporting their occupiers. And look, landlords make promise to their clients as well, clients being the occupier, as if we will do our best to give you as good an experience and something. So we had lots of landlords who were trying to adhere to that sort of promise and do the best that they could in the climate they were faced with as well, which was also awful for them.
100%, yeah. And I guess you exactly, in hard times, you forge good relationships with people. I mean, occupier to landlord, but I guess maybe also you guys as a company realized some of these landlords, good potential, partners that you work with. Do you have certain solidified like relationships or landlords who, of course, you're not advising for them, but people who you tend to trust and work with?
We don't just care about the deal, we care about clients' experiences. So we would never knowingly put a client in a certain building because it was a better deal, knowing that that landlord didn't have a great track record in delivering kind of a good experience. So one of the things when we shortlist buildings is that we will communicate to the client the reputation of that landlord, where they're positioned in the marketplace, what's their kind of ethos, our own client's experience, because when you've been around for 23 years, I can tell you we've put every occupier in with every landlord. So part of our shortlisting, part of how we prioritize buildings over others is landlords that provide what we feel to be like really good experiences.
Fantastic.
And because we don't act for landlords, we have no loyalty. So we can matter of factly say, look, whilst you like this particular space, the experience that you may have here versus something else could be different. And I promise you, our clients who have had bad experiences with landlords won't make their decision based on what's the best design. They will make their decision on who will give them the best experience, because you can have an awful existence if you're with a landlord that doesn't sort of look after you. But it's got much better. I mean, institutional landlords have got far superior, even over the last sort of decade. And I know that that's one thing that many landlords are doing now, which is obsessed around creating this occupier experience whilst they're in occupation. But going to your point is, for us, doing the deal is the start of their journey within that particular building. So our job finishes at the start of their next chapter. So it's really important that we get that landlord right.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So for a founder who is starting to think about their next office and wants to make sure that they end up in the right place for the right reasons, what is the most important advice that they hear?
I think that one of the most important questions is think about what is the purpose of the office? What do you want it to do? What do you want it to achieve? How can it act as an enabler to your business? And think about those things first. Less about, you'll get to location, you'll get to those other more kind of binary kind of specifics, but I think you really need to think about what is the purpose of the office as your starter, as well as how quickly you think you will scale, so you can start to consider about the flexibility.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. It's been amazing to have you on the podcast, Robert. I really appreciate you jumping on.
Oh, it's been a pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much. And to everybody who's tuned in, thank you so much for watching the Lead and Your Founder podcast again, and we'll catch you on the next episode.